Thank you for joining Wars of the Roses. As we continue with Part 3, from The Meaning of Masonry by Albert Pike. Next, Masonry required of its initiates fidelity. Truth plighted is ever to be kept. It does not cease to repeat them, was an axiom even among pagans. The virtuous Roman said, either let not that which seems expedient be base, or if it be base, let it not seem expedient. The word of a Mason, like that of a knight in the times of chivalry once given, ought to be sacred, and the judgment of his brethren upon him who violates his pledge should be stern as the judgments of the Roman Censors against him who violated his oath. Calamity should always be chosen rather than baseness, and we should prefer to die rather than be dishonored. Industry and honesty are virtues peculiarly inculcated in Masonry. When the arrogant Stuarts sat upon the throne of England and the Bourbons on that of France, each claiming to rule by divine right, when republican government was more remote from actual life than Utopia or the New Atlantis, when nobility thought that it was born to rule and the people to toil and serve, when rank and caste and privilege looked down with lordly contempt upon the leathern apron of the artisan and the frieze jerkin of the laborer, the great order wrought silently in its degree of apprentice, craftsman and master mason or builder, adopted for itself a democratic system of government, and for the successor of the demigods and princess of the old legends of the mysteries, selected an humble artisan, the son of a poor widow of Tyre, an industrious and honest man, cunning to work in brass and iron, and represented him as the peer of kings. The history of the world hardly offers a more significant and extraordinary lesson. As the bees have no love for drones, so true Masons have none for the idle and lazy, for those who are so are already useless, and in the way to become dissipated and vicious, and perfect honesty, which ought to be the common qualification of all, is more rarely met with than diamonds. To do earnestly and steadily, to do faithfully and honestly that which we have to do, perhaps this wants but little when looked at from every point of view of including the whole body of the moral law. We think at the age of 20 that life is much too long for that which we have to learn and do, and that there is an almost fabulous distance between our age and that of our grandfather. But when, at the age of 60, if we are fortunate enough to reach it, or unfortunate enough, as the case may be, and according as we have used or wasted our time, we halt and look back along the way that we have come and cast up and try to balance our accounts with time, we find that we have made life much too short and thrown away a large portion of our days. We then in our mind deduct from the sum total of our years the hours that we unnecessarily have spent in sleep, the waking hours each day during which the surface of the mind's pool has not been stirred or ruffled by a single thought, the days that we have got rid of as we could, to attain some real or fancied object that lay beyond, in the way between, which and us stood irksomely the intervening days, and the hours misspent and worse than wasted in folly and dissipation. And we acknowledge with many a sigh that we could have learned and done in half a score of years well spent, more than we have learned and done in our 40 years of manhood, to learn and to do. This is the soul's work here below. The soul grows as truly as an oak grows, as the tree takes the air and the particles that float in the air, the dew and rain, and the food that in the earth lies piled around its roots, and by its mysterious chemistry transmutes them into sap and fiber, into wood and leaf and flower and fruit, and taste and color and perfume. So the soul drinks in knowledge, and by a divine alchemy changes what it learns into its own substance, and develops itself from within outwardly, and grows with an inherent force and power like those which lie hid in the small germ of the acorn, to sleep little and to study much, to say little and to hear and think much, to learn that we may be able to do, and then to do earnestly and vigorously whatever is required by duty, by the interests of our fellows, our country and mankind. These are the duties which Masonry prescribes to its initiates. It requires of them honesty in contract, sincerity in affirming, simplicity in bargaining, and faithfulness in performing. It says to them in the terse language of an old writer, lie not at all, neither in a little thing nor in a great, neither in the substance nor in the circumstance, neither in word nor deed. That is, pretend not what is false, aver not what is untrue, and let the measure of your affirmation or denial be the understanding of your contractor. That any man should be the worse for us, and our direct act, and by our intention, is against the rule of equity, of justice, and of charity. We then do not that to others which we might reasonably wish they should do unto us, for we grow richer upon the ruins of their fortune. The good mason does not wish to receive anything from another, without returning him an equivalent, and by that simple principle, Masonry discountenances bets and gaming among its members, while it frowns upon him who takes wages or fees for a work that he is incompetent to do, or demands more than his services are honestly and according to the custom worth, upon the merchant who sells an inferior article for a sound price, upon the speculator who makes the needs and distresses of other men his exchequer. It says to every mason, it should be our earnest desire so to live and deal and act that when it comes to us to die, we shall be able to say, and our consciences to adjudge, that no man on earth is poorer because we are richer, that what we have honestly earned or purchased, and that no man, and more especially no widow or orphan, can stand up before God and claim that by the rules of equity administered in his great chancery, this house in which we die, this land that we devise among our heirs, this money which enriches those who survive to bear our name, is his or hers and not ours, and we in that great forum are only their trustees. For it is most certain that God is just, and will sternly enforce every such trust, and that to all whom we despoil, to all whom we defraud, to all from whom we take anything whatever, without full and fair equivalent, he will decree an adequate and ample compensation. Be careful then, it says to every brother, that they who receive no wages, here or elsewhere, that are not thy due. For if thou dost, thou wrongest someone by taking that which in God's chancery belongs to him, and whether that which thou takest thus be wealth or rank or influence or reputation. Again, it says to him, be zealous and faithful, be disinterested and benevolent, act the peacemaker in case of dissensions, disputes, and quarrels among the brethren. Duty is the moral magnetism that controls and guides the true mason's course over the tumultuous seas of life. Whether the stars of honor, reputation, and reward do or do not shine in the light of day or in the darkness of the night of trouble and adversity, in calm or storm, that unerring magnet still shows him the true course to steer and indicates with certainty whereaway lies the port, which not to reach involves shipwreck and dishonor. He follows implicitly its silent bidding, as the mariner, when land is for many days not in sight, and the ocean without path or landmark howls angrily around him, follows the silent bidding of the Needle, as though it were God's finger pointing unerringly to the north. To perform that duty, whether the performance be rewarded or unrewarded, is his sole care. Nor does it matter to him, though of this performance there may be no witnesses, and though what he has done will be forever unknown to all mankind. Times change and circumstances, but virtue, in the original meaning of the old Roman word virtus, manliness, and duty, ever remain the same. The evils to be confronted only take another shape and are developed in a different form. There is the same need now of truth and loyalty as there was in the days of knighthood. In no age of the world has man had better opportunity than now to display a lofty manliness and noble heroism. When a fearful epidemic ravages a city and death is inhaled with the air men breathe, when the living scarcely suffice to bury the dead, most men flee in abject terror to return and live, respectable and influential when the danger has passed away. But the old knightly spirit of devotion and disinterestedness and contempt of death still lives and is not extinct in the human heart. Everywhere a few are found to stand firmly and unflinchingly at their posts, to front and defy the danger, not for money, nor to be honored for it, nor to protect their own household, but from mere humanity, and to obey the unerring dictates of duty. Brethren of some benevolent order or association, or philanthropists that belong to no order, they nurse the sick, breathing the pestilential atmosphere of the hospital. They explore the dens of want and misery. Gentle as women, they soften the pangs of the dying and feed the lamp of life in the convalescent. They perform the last sad offices to the dead, and they seek for all no other reward than the approval of their own consciences. Like one, a member of the great order, whom, because he lives among us and seeks no such acknowledgement I will not name, They go as volunteers to distant cities where the cross is marked on every door. The pestilence crouches in every house, and dismay and terror are in every heart, there to attend the sick and relieve the suffering. And when the ghastly destroyer has passed away, a state engraves their names upon the eternal tablets of its memory, and mothers teach their children to bless them and remember them in their prayers. These obey the Masonic law of duty. These and the captain who remains at his post on board his shattered ship until the last boat loaded to the water's edge with passengers and crew has parted from her side, and then, like Herndon, goes calmly down with her into the mysterious depths of the ocean. The pilot who stands at the wheel while the swift flames eddy round him and scorch away his life. The fireman who climbs the blazing walls and plunges amid the flames to save the lives of those who have upon him no claim by tie of blood, of friendship, or even of ordinary acquaintance. These and all men who set at the post of duty stand there manfully to die if need be, but not to desert their post. The Great Order insists that its initiates shall be just, that faithfully using that moral faculty, the conscience, and applying it to existing relations and circumstances, they shall develop it and all its kindred powers, and so deduce the duties that out of these relations and these circumstances, and by them limited and qualified, arise and become obligatory upon us, and to learn justice, the law of right, the divine rule of conduct for human life. It says, in part in the words of a profound, if erratic thinker, every departure from real practical justice is no doubt attended with loss to the unjust man, though the loss is not reported to the public. Injustice, public or private, like every other sin and wrong, is inevitably followed by its consequences, which men style its punishment. The selfish, the grasping, the inhuman, the fraudulently ungenerous employer and the cruel master are detested by the great popular heart, while the kind master, the liberal employer, the generous, the humane, and the just have the good opinion of all men, and even envy is a tribute to their virtues. Men honor all who stand up for truth and right and never shrink. The world builds monuments to its patriots and tears down the statues of its knaves. Four great statesmen, organizers of the right embalmed in stone, look down upon the lawgivers of France as they pass to their hall of legislation, silent orators to tell how nations love the just. How we revere the marble lineaments of those just judges, J and Mars Hall, that look so calmly towards the living bench of the Supreme Court of the United States. What a monument Washington has built in the heart of America and all the world, not because he dreamed of an impracticable ideal justice, but by his constant and successful effort to be practically just. But necessity only and the greatest good of the greatest number can legitimately interfere with the dominion of absolute and ideal justice. Government should not foster the strong at the expense of the weak, nor protect the capitalist and tax the laborer. The powerful should not seek a monopoly of development and enjoyment. Not prudence only and the expedient for today should be appealed to by statesmen, but conscience and the right. Justice should not be forgotten in looking at interest, nor political morality neglected for political economy. We should not have national housekeeping instead of national organization on the basis of right. We may well differ as to the abstract right of many things, for every such question has many sides, and few men look at all of them, many only at one. But we all readily recognize cruelty, unfairness, inhumanity, partiality, overreaching, hard dealing by their ugly and familiar lineaments. We do not need to sit as a court of errors and appeals to revise and reverse God's providences in order to know and to hate and despise them. And so it says, and again partly in the words of the same thinker, a sentence is written against all that is unjust, written by God in the nature of man and in the nature of the universe, because it is in the nature of God. Fidelity to your faculties, trust in their convictions, that is justice to yourself, a life in obedience thereto, that is justice towards men. No wrong is really successful. The gain of injustice is a loss, its pleasure, suffering. Iniquity often seems to prosper, but its success is its defeat and shame. After a long while, the day of reckoning ever comes, to nation as to individual. The knave deceives himself. The miser, starving his brother's body, starves also his own soul. and at death shall creep out of his great estate of injustice, poor and naked and miserable. Whoso escapes a duty avoids a gain. Outward judgment often fails, inward justice never, and we ever see a continual and progressive triumph of the right. Truth, a Mason is early told, is a divine attribute and the foundation of every virtue, and frankness, reliability, sincerity, straightforwardness, plain dealing are but different modes in which truth develops itself. Our lectures say, the dead, the absent, the innocent, and those that trust him, no Mason will deceive willingly. To all these he owes a nobler justice in that they are the most certain trials of human equity. Only the most abandoned of men, said Cicero, would deceive him who would have remained uninjured if he had not trusted. All the noble deeds that have beat their marches through succeeding ages have proceeded from men of truth and genuine courage. The man who is always true is both virtuous and wise, and thus possesses the greatest guards of safety, for the law has not power to strike the virtuous, nor can fortune subvert the wise. In this age of exaggeration and insincere profession, when books are written and published and even read, whose object is to teach the rising generation how easily a fortune may be made by entrapping gulls with lies. And when for one to give a true account or a fair one of the speech or argument made against his opinions or his party, is a thing so rare that the recurrence of the phenomenon at long intervals goes far to make the most confirmed and incurable infidel yield up his unbelief in miracles. In this age, when falsehoods told for effect and the faculty of utterance whereof is a gift that yields a comfortable revenue can get printed by steam and travel on the invisible wings of the lightning, Masonry still adheres to its old morals and says to its initiates, "Speak thou always the simple truth, no more and no less, or else speak not at all." And it adds, "Be thou no tale-bearer nor retailer of scandal, for he who is so is certain often to go beyond the truth, with the errors and even the sins of other men that do not personally affect us or ours, and need not our condemnation to be odious. We have really nothing to do. The journalist has no patent that makes him the censor of morals. There is no obligation resting on us to trumpet forth our disapproval of every injudicious, improper, or wrongful act that every other man commits. One is not obliged to enlist in the police or play the spy and the informer. One ought, a great German says, to write or speak against no other in this world. Each man in it has enough to do, to watch and keep guard over himself. Each of us is sick enough in this great lazaretto, and journalism and political writing constantly remind us of a scene once witnessed in a little hospital, where it was horrible to hear how the patients mockingly reproached each other with their disorders and infirmities, how one who was worn to a skeleton by consumption jeered at another who was bloated by dropsy, how the leper laughed at his roommate's cancer of the face, and this one again at his neighbor's paralysis. Until at last the delirious fever patient sprang out of his bed and tore away the coverings from the wounded bodies of his companions, and nothing was to be seen but hideous misery and mutilation. If we would but look at it aright, is the business of parading before all the world every domestic tragedy and every act of disreputable villainy any less disgusting or any more profitable to humanity? Very often the censure bestowed upon men's acts by those who have elected and commissioned themselves keepers of the public morals is undeserved. Often it is not only undeserved, but praise is due instead of censure, and when deserved, it is always extravagant and therefore unjust. Even the man who does wrong and commits errors often has a quiet home, a peaceful fireside, a gentle, loving wife and innocent children who do not know of his misdeeds, past and long repented of, or present and hereafter to be atoned for by sincere penitence and mighty agonies and bitter remorse. Or if they do love him all the better, because being mortal he hath erred, and being in the image of God he hath repented, or will, persuaded by their soft and gentle influences, repent and make atonement, if no uninvited censor thrusts himself between him and them. That every blow aimed at this husband and father strikes brutally at the bosoms of the wife and daughters, and makes them, though innocent, to partake of the shame which falls on him, does not stay the hand of the modern guardian of public morals, but brave as Caesar, he strikes and slays, and then calls on those to whose vicious appetites he has pandered to admire and praise him for the generous and manly act. If ye seek, says an old writer, for high and strained carriages, You shall for the most part meet with them in low men. Arrogance is a weed that ever grows on a dunghill. There is no arrogance so great as the proclaiming of other men's errors and faults by those who understand nothing but the dregs of actions, and who make it their business to besmear deserving fames. It is no more honorable now than heretofore, for one to become a perpetual spy upon the actions of other men, and a general talebearer, even if one is fortunate enough to own a press and types, and so can retail his scandal to a multitude instead of one. Imagine only a gentleman making it his trade whereby to earn a living, to fish in all the moral sewers of a city for all the instances of low vice and disgusting depravity, that for the credit of human nature ought to be ignored, and then to stand at the street corners and retail them orally to all the prurient and bestial who would listen, and for his trouble deposit in his palm a sixpence. The same old writer adds, and his words are singularly applicable today, their malice makes them nimble-eyed, apt to note a fault and publish it, and with a strained construction to deprave those things that the doer's intents have told his soul were honest. They set the vices of other men on high for the gaze of the world. If they cannot wound upon proofs, they will do it upon likelihoods, and if not upon them, they manufacture lies, as God created the world out of nothing, knowing that the multitude will believe them, because affirmations are apter to win belief than negatives to uncredit them, and that a lie travels faster than an eagle flies, while contradiction lags after it at a snail's pace, and halting never overtakes it. In his words, Masonry lays down its rule. If there be virtues, and thou art called upon to speak of him that owns them, do thou tell them forth impartially. And if there be vices mixed with them, be thou content the world shall know them by some other tongue than thine. For if the evildoer himself deserve no pity, which Christ, who died for him, does not say, his wife, his parents, or his children, or other innocent persons who love him may. The Mason is devoted to the cause of liberality and toleration against fanaticism and persecution, political and religious, to that of education or instruction and enlightenment against error, barbarism, and ignorance. Toleration, holding that every other man has the same right to his opinion and faith that we have to ours. Liberality, holding that, as no human being can say with certainty, in the clash and conflict of hostile faiths and creeds, what is truth, or that he is surely in possession thereof. So everyone should feel that it is quite possible that another, equally honest and sincere with himself, and yet holding the contrary opinion, may himself be in possession, and that whatever one firmly and conscientiously believes is truth to him. These are the mortal enemies of that fanaticism which persecutes for opinion's sake and initiates crusades against whatever it deems in its imaginary holiness to be contrary to the law of God. And education, instruction, and enlightenment are the only certain means by which intolerance and fanaticism can be rendered powerless. No true Mason scoffs at honest convictions and an ardent zeal in the cause of truth and justice. But he absolutely denies the right of any man to assume the prerogative of deity and condemn his brother's faith and opinions as heretical and deserving to be punished. Nor does he approve the course of those who endanger the peace of great nations and the solid interests of their own race by indulging in the cheap luxury of a chimerical and visionary philanthropy, who draw their robes around them to avoid contact with their fellows and think themselves nearer to heaven by proclaiming their own holiness. For he knows that intolerance and bigotry have been infinitely greater curses to mankind than ignorance and error. He does not forget that Galileo was denied the free enjoyment of light and air, because he averred that the earth moved, and that 2 centuries ago the rack and the stake would have been the reward of Agassiz and Lyell. Better any error than persecution. Better any belief or opinion, however irrational and absurd, than the thumbscrew and the auto da fe. And he knows also how unspeakably absurd it is for a creature to whom himself and everything within and around him are mysteries to torture and even slay others, because they do not think as he does in regard to the profoundest of all those mysteries, the least of which it is utterly beyond the comprehension of either to understand. It holds, in the language of a wise writer, that virtue by no means consists in the thinking or believing, which is an accidental, inevitable matter where the man is sincere, but in the doing, which depends solely on himself. Virtue is but heroic bravery to do the thing thought to be true in spite of all enemies of flesh or spirit, or temptations or menaces. Man is accountable for the uprightness of his doctrine, but not for the rightness of it. Devout enthusiasm is far easier than a good action. The end of thought is action, and the sole purpose of religion is an ethic. It is right to require of a man that he shall seek for the truth, but not that he shall find it. A speculative error, engendered in that huge storehouse of ignorance, human misunderstanding, ought not to annihilate in our minds the fervent admiration which every just and right-minded man ought to feel and knows he ought to feel of a life of constant goodness and continual self-sacrifice. All the actions of a man's life, harmonious in excellence as the planets in their orbits, should weigh something more than feathers in the scale, even if he is so far unfortunate as to be unable to solve the mystery of mysteries. It is not what we believe, but what we become that is important to a man, and religion is but an instrument to ennoble the moral nature of man. That is equally the purpose and mission of Masonry, to diffuse useful information, to further intellectual refinement, to hasten the coming of the great day when the dawn of general knowledge shall chase away the lazy, lingering mists. Even from the base of the great social pyramid is its high calling, in which the most splendid and consummate virtue may well press onward, eager to bear a part. And it is to be hoped that the time will soon arrive for which Masonry has so long labored, when, as men will no longer suffer themselves to be led blindfold in ignorance, so will they no more yield to the vile principle of judging and treating their fellow creatures, not according to the intrinsic merit of their actions, but according to the accidental and involuntary coincidence of their opinion. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.